got to get my... Oh, here we go. This is Link, my sound man. Let's give him a hand. Well done, Link. He comes to run all the sound for us. And everything that's provided here, all the banners and the screens and the sound system, everything, it's all been provided by you guys. People have paid for this. Pretty cool. And it's very generous. Kiwis are hugely generous, and I just so appreciate them getting behind what we're trying to do. So welcome tonight to our second meeting in the beautiful Blenheim. Man, you've got some city here. It's so beautiful. In Blenheim, in Auckland here, you guys are amazing. Look at these with front row. You're the only place in the whole country where we've had a front row with wine. So, yeah, they're the Motueka people, right? You're just the samplers. You just left the vineyard. Okay, so what I want to do tonight, we've got to do a little bit of housekeeping before we get going here. I want you to support these guys at The Honest Lawyer because Chris and Tanya, who own this beautiful establishment, they've been absolutely hammered by activists and people online saying, you're hosting this racist Julian Bachelor, and you're also must be a racist, and so we want, we're going to pull it, we're going to advertise you negatively everywhere and try and damage you and have cancellations, and we're going to, so on and so on and so on. So I said, well, let's fight back, let's push back against all that, and let's all, come to this place and have your dinner instead of somewhere else and give them some business. So let's give them a clap. They're not even here, but I reckon we should support them because what's happened around the country is we've had people in private. First of all, you've got council buildings that cancel out on us all the time. We had one, how many get my blog? We'd like the whole lot of you to get my blog because we were cancelled out of one in Hamilton. And just yesterday it surfaced. They said, we're cancelling this for health and safety reasons. This was about 3 weeks ago. And they said there could be knives and guns and people with knives and guns and flying objects and damage. And, none of this has ever happened on our thing, on any of our tour. And then a guy yesterday got on the internet with a little big smile and everything and from the City Council in Hamilton and said it was me who cancelled it. He was one of the appointed Maori representatives. Did you see that? Did you notice that? And so we have these councils who are just cancelling free speech, at will. So we have to go to private buildings, and when we go to private buildings, this sort of thing happens. They all get intimidated and attacked, and a lot of them just cave in. Oh, I'm sorry. The best one we had was a church actually in Kirikiri, and it was run by Samoans, and they were beautiful people. And the minister came and saw me, very softly spoken. He says, "Nobody bullies us. Nobody bullies us. We're Samoan." He says, "We're going to have your meeting." So the office lady, I heard her, she was on the phone. Activists were ringing her. You're a racist and you're holding meetings for racists. And she said, hang on a minute. You can come next week and have a meeting about what's good about co-governance and we'll host you. This is a free speech church. Free speech church. Thank you. Click. So she had about 5 in a row and I thought that's the way you deal with it. So we've had some very good, strong people. We've had other people who just cave in, with the puff of a breeze. So I want you to fill in your forms. Now, I thought I was going to give you a little start, but no. You got a form like this. Hold your form up. We have to do this housekeeping first, okay? This is a form you need to fill out. I've got pens here. I want you two come here and start handing out some of these pens to people, please. That would be great. So you hand out that you're the pen hander-outer. And I want you to fill in that form because this is what we're trying to do. I'll tell you why we want you to fill this out. Is that your form? I took it off you. Pinched it. We have a plan to get a booklet to every single one of my books, which you've got free tonight. We gave you one, this one here. This book here, thank you. You're turning out to be a number one little prop here. This book here, we've sold 350,000, we printed 350,000 of these books in 12 weeks. So they're going out at... what's 350,000 divided by 3? That's about 12. About 12. So they're going out at about 120,000 a month printing. Now, there's a massive demand for this because these things are like a trigger. They awaken people. When they read them, they go, I never realised it was so bad and I want to help you. Because New Zealand's in a very sick state at the moment. on a whole number of fronts. So we have a plan to get this to this booklet to every single house in the whole area around where you live here. Marlborough, Nelson, Tasman, everywhere. And so we need a whole team of people who can get these to people, because the first stage to bring a revolution, and by that a peaceful revolution, is to bring awareness to people. They have to be awakened. And they're not awake at the moment. And the government's flat out trying to brainwash everybody and groom people for tribal takeover. That's a fact. And I'll talk about that. So we want your name and your address, and we put you on a database so that we can get in contact with you and say, would you like to deliver some books to a few streets around your area? See what I mean? Because we have to be a team. So if we don't get your info, we can't do that. So Bruce Moon, who is a friend of mine. How many heard of Bruce Moon, the historian? Okay, I have some of his books here for sale, and other people, they're $30. There's two on my table here, but his representative, Bruce Moon's representative called Jeff, is here. He's got a whole lot of them. Just hang on to your things. You want a new one? Did somebody make a mistake? Here you go. We do have some. They're actually, So Bruce Moon's here. We'd love you to get his book. Bruce Moon came to my seminar 3 nights ago. He sat in the front row, and I've been communicating with him. He endorsed my book here. He endorsed it and said, everybody should read this. And I was very intimidated by having Bruce Moon here, because I'm talking about history pretty much all night. And Bruce Moon said to me at the end, good boy, you did well. And so I got a tick from him with all the history I'm about to give you. So I wanted to mention Bruce and to tell you you've got a superstar living here. Now, we do have a superstar living in Nelson. Now, we do have another event here on the 12th of July. We're going to run one of these in Richmond. We've got one in Motueka on the 13th, and we're looking at one at Golden Bay. And there could be a whole lot of other events, so we're going to run in July around this area. So if you've got an area where you'd like to have an event happen, this event tonight, happen in your area, you must let us know. And we can try and make it happen for you. Is that good? Okay. So tonight we're going to video this evening, and that'll be put up on the internet. So be a good crowd, please. I want you to clap a lot, and well, I'm just joking. I want you to just sort of join in and loosen up and have a fun night. Okay, here we go. All right. So if you want to get my email, take a photo of that, because we give you a blog. We put out a blog every day, and we want to keep in contact with you so you know what's going on around the country. Because sometimes we get information about what's going on that you don't know about, and you won't know about unless I tell you about it. So we want to get you. On my blog if you can. Okay. So here's Mr. Hipkins. Sorry. Usually I have a sick bag under your seat if you need one. And we've run out of them because they were all used last night. And there's Mr. Luxon, of course. And so tonight we're going to be obedient to the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition, because they've both exhorted us as leaders to discuss co-governance. Have they not? Yes or no? They have. Okay, maybe you don't know that, but they have. So give yourselves a clap for being good, obedient little citizens. Well done. Yeah, okay, you've been groomed. Okay, good. All right, so let's hear what Mr. Hipkins says about co-governance.
Come over here.
Prime Minister, co-governance came up again at Ratana yesterday. You've spoken about confusion about what the term means, and the others are misinterpreting it to raise fear. Does the government have some responsibility for that, for not explaining it properly, and what will you do to address that?
Look, as I said yesterday, co-governance can mean different things in different situations. We should have a mature discussion about it, not one that's informed by bumper sticker slogans. We should make sure that we're informing New Zealanders what we're doing and why we're doing it. As I indicated yesterday, the last national government entered a multitude of co-governance arrangements during their time in office. And in fact, some of the co-governance, or some of the examples put forward by the National Party yesterday of initiatives that they support have elements of co-governance within them. So if we think about, kura kaupapa, for example, the wānanga, even whanaora, there's elements of co-governance within that.
So my conclusion is that Mr. Hipkins is a liar, and he's a professional liar, because I wrote about what co-governance is in my little book. In this book here, how many have actually read this book? How many read this? Okay, I wrote about what co-governance actually is And it's basically about his government, what they've done. It's about his MPs. The last 6 years, it wasn't all him, but he was a key to it. He was one of the keys. Ardern's, really gave it a big push, and then he's just come along like Ardern version 2 and kept on pushing it. So if he says, we need to have a discussion about this, we don't want bumper stickers, we want to have a mature discussion, so on, so on, so on, so on. This is just spin. He knows what it is. It's the tribal takeover of New Zealand. And his Maori caucus are right in the middle of this, driving it. Plus you've got MPs like McAnulty, and you've got Robinson funding it, and you've got him who's pushing it, pretending he doesn't know what it is, trying to muddy the waters. He's a liar. Yeah, well, that was sort of confirms everything, doesn't it, really? Come on. So let's hear what Mr. Luxon says.
Co-governance has been messily handled and explained by this government because they haven't been upfront on such a big constitutional issue. They haven't taken people with them, and as a consequence, become increasingly divisive across New Zealand.
What do you mean by the conversation has been immature around co-governance?
Well, it has been. It's been immature and divisive because essentially the Prime Minister hasn't come forward, spent her huge political capital making the case to the New Zealand people and taking them with her on it, and then having a decent debate and discussion about it. We've been calling for a decent discussion about it.
Now, honestly, I went up to Mr. Retty at a field day in Fielding about, not in Fielding, sorry, in Dargaville about, I don't know, it would have been a couple of months ago now. And I just went up, he didn't know who I was or anything, and I said he was in the National Party tent at this field day. And I said, Mr. Retty, what do you think? What does National think about co-governance? And he goes, oh, we're totally against it. Totally against it. And then I said, well, hang on a minute. Your leader just last week said he was okay about it with co-governance for rivers and lakes and mountains and beaches and natural resources, but not for social services like hospitals, schools, and so on. And he said, oh, no. What I meant was he's totally against having co-governance in hospitals and schools. And so I just went, you know what, and Mr. Luxon, I'm apolitical. I'll attack all the parties for their stance on co-governance. But Mr. Luxon is a big worry to me because he's making it sound like if it's explained properly, co-governance is okay. We just need to explain it properly. Well, you know what, if you explain it properly, it's a nightmare. Is that true or not? Yes or no? Yes. If you fully understand this, it's an absolute nightmare. He should have gone on and said, you know what, if we become the government, we're going to reset the hard drive. We're going to get back to the Maori Treaty of Waitangi. It's going to be equality for all. No racial group gets any favours. The 160 cultures here in this country are going to be all treated equally. It's going to be one vote, one person, and all votes are going to be equal value. Thank you. And just walked off. Give me a clap for that. Come on. You're being obedient. All right. So I put this word up here, and I've had a lot of criticism for using this word, but it's actually a word and it's got a meaning, and I want to use it. And so I said this, look, I want to talk about this word. The Encyclopedia Britannica defines the war like this. It says war, in the popular sense, is a conflict between political groups. This is a conflict. I've entered a conflict. There's a conflict going on in New Zealand right now, and it's a political conflict. There's some of the opposition outside here. They're a little tiny, wee little, like a flea on a dog's back compared to what's actually it's like. But they are still part of the opposition. And we're a group here who are opposing co-governance. Yes or no? Yes, we are? Yeah, we are. Okay, good. We've got to be on the same page. And it involves hostilities. So I've had my windscreen broken on my car. I've had all sorts of things happen. We're just dealing with a death threat at the moment. And so it doesn't worry me whatsoever. Last night we had people texting me at midnight, we know where you are, and and I went, good night, and just slept like a baby. And so I just went to sleep. Yeah, and it's been going on for considerable duration. This has been happening since 1975. And if you want to really go back to where it started, it's not 1867 and the Electoral Act where Maori were given seats, special seats. And they were then got the feeling that they were special and they could get special things that nobody else in New Zealand could get. And it's just gone like this. It's got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Now, I'm not a racist, I'm just telling you the truth. One of the things I said I would do when I started out on this tour was I said, I'm never going to be woke and I'm never going to be PC. I'm going to tell people the truth. I don't care if this was filled with 100 militant Maoris, I would say the same presentation. I don't water anything down. I just tell the truth. And that's how it is. And it's got magnitude. It's now going to affect the whole country. And if we don't stop this, New Zealand is heading to becoming the Zimbabwe of the South Pacific. This is the most serious problem we've faced since 1840. You might talk about inflation, and you might talk about the cost of living, and you might talk about this, and none of these, they all pale into absolute insignificance compared to this, to co-governance. Because it's going to wreck the country forever. I'm totally against all physical violence. I want to let you know that. So this is a political war. It's not a war that we're going to fight with anything that's violent. You happy about that? Okay, because I'm not sure whether you'd make good soldiers anyway. But anyway, so, all right. Okay, so who are the parties in this war? Well, it's a war led by tribal representatives, private tribal companies, or elite Maori to take over New Zealand. Sometimes they're called treatyists. The elite Maori or treatyists are a distinct group. There may be 1,000 of them. They do not represent all Maori or the vast majority of Kiwis. I have friends who are Maori. They don't want co-governance. Tribal leaders are feathering their own nests to further their own self-interest. If they're not stopped, New Zealand is headed to becoming the Zimbabwe of the South Pacific. Now, so who else is helping elite Maori in this war? Well, the media is massively helping elite Maori. I'll tell you how they're doing it. This is the $55 million Public Interest Journalism Fund. Now, let me give you a little bit of background. When COVID hit New Zealand, media outlets struggled because for a couple of years there was basically, they had no income, but they had outgoings like rents and power and wages and so on. So by the time COVID finished, a lot of media agencies were about to hit the wall. So the government recognized this and they did something very evil, very wrong and very corrupt. They said, let's set up this fund, and this is a way that we can further co-governance and further the Maori agenda for New Zealand. So what they did is they set up this contract, and they entered into a contractual arrangement with all the media agencies in New Zealand. And there's only three of them now, that have not taken part of this. And that is a newspaper on the West Coast, Sean Plunkett at the Platform, and RCR Radio. So what they did is this, look. This is called the Tītariti Framework for News Media. If you signed up for some of this money, and the New Zealand Herald took $1 million, you had to agree to promote certain things in your newspaper and your TV station or your radio station. And here's what they are. These are the actual words from page 3 of the contract media outlets must sign if they want money. The Public Interest Journalism Fund must achieve all of these things. Actively promote the principles of partnership. Actively acknowledge Maori as a Tītariti partner. You must say that the Crown and Maori are in partnership via the treaty. You must say this. Then it went on to say this, participation and active protection under Tītariti o Waitangi. In other words, what that's saying is, I put this in red, if anybody surfaces in our society, in our country, who says, no, Maori are not in partnership with the Crown, they're not a Tītariti partner, then you must attack them. Your newspaper, your TV, and your radio station must attack that person or that group who surfaces to say these things are not true. That's why I'm getting a hell of a hard time. Do you know the media? They have been going around the mayors in New Zealand asking for their hard drives, their telephone conversations, to see if, through the Official Information Office, to see if I have to try and find some dirt on me where I've said something racist. Me and a mayor have been talking in a racist way. They've rung my brother in London saying, have you got any dirt on Julian? True. This is dirty politics. The contract further states, Maori have never ceded sovereignty to Britain or any other state. You've got to say that. You've got to start promoting that. You also have to say, this means our society has a foundation of institutional racism. You have to say that this is what our society is about. We live in a society that perpetuates racism and inequities. You have to say these things and you have to promote this and say this is what our society really is. How many have seen all this stuff in newspapers or on TV or wherever? It's everywhere. In fact, tonight I went to get my hair cut, and there was a lady there, husband and wife, running a salon just up the road here. And we got talking, and she said, oh, I'm a school teacher. She said, I'm training. I'm doing my first year. She said, what's co-governance all about? And I said, well, it's really about the Maori takeover of New Zealand. And I said, you would notice this in your teaching profession, because you're going to be heavily brainwashed. You know that. And she said, you know what? I'm really worried. I've already noticed it. I've only been going this year, my first year. She said, I can feel that we're being groomed and brainwashed. She says, I'm not even you have to say that colonization was bad in this country, and you have to start promoting that fact that colonization was bad and New Zealand needs to decolonize. So, this is how the media works. We've been on TV3 News quite a bit, and also One News. We've had a few times when we've made it to the main news. How many have seen those items? Okay, you haven't? Oh, you didn't miss much. Okay, so anyway, here is TV3, and this is how the media report is manipulated to create an alarming impression. They want you, the audience out there in New Zealand, to think of me as like a radical, extremist guy, and if you come to my meetings, they're dangerous. And there's going to be, activists and police and protesters, and really, honestly, this is what you attract. It's all your fault, right? So this is what they try to portray. So I'm going to show this to you and show you how it works. Now, there's one lady here called Michaela Matanga. She's a Maori activist, and she's kind of like the pin-up girl of this little report that's done by TV3. So the media are collaborating with her. And now I'm going to give you a commentary as we watch this together. So let's watch this.
Night, with police having to separate protesters from attendees. The meeting didn't get violent, but comes at a time when the term co-governance is controversial, and there are still 42 more events planned. Tia McDougall reports.
Chanting no in the faces of Māori protesters.
You see? Now they say this, look, what's the first thing they say? Chanting no in the face of Maori protesters. Now this is a complete lie. Because what actually happened was, we had a meeting just like this, and 50 protesters suddenly came in the back of the meeting, and we had a guy coming down the middle, doing like a haka. Coming towards me, and then they came up to people with their cell phones like this. This is the protesters going up to people like this, right in their faces and so that lady was reacting to having cell phones from activists pushed in her face. But they're saying, you see what the participants in Julian's seminar were doing? They were the aggressors. This is what the media does. So let's keep watching this, and I'll just give you the commentary as we go through it.
Supporters of the anti-co-governance roadshow didn't hold back when confronted by those opposing the meeting. The roadshow is organised by this man, Julian Batchelor, who wants to spread his stance on co-governance.
It's illegal. It's based on a fraudulent interpretation of the Treaty of Waitangi.
However, he's often met with protesters. Yesterday's were from local iwi Ngātu Manuhiri and members of the Te Herenga Waka o Orewa Marae.
The protesters don't know what a racist is, and they don't know what the Treaty of Waitangi is.
From being there, I could tell that the attendees were fearful and they were worried and they were misinformed.
I didn't expect it to be what it was. There was about 20 to 30 police officers there.
Authorities kept the peace, but insults were still exchanged.
He said, what was it? Horrible. You're horrible. And then he followed up by saying, and you probably stink as well.
Okay. How would you describe the behaviour of some of your supporters?
Oh, my supporters were fantastic. They were amazing. Sometimes they're a little bit conservative.
But supporters are not enough. Batchelor wants his message known at the Beehive.
I've had political parties talk to me. I'm not prepared to say who they are. I'm trying to get 100,000 people to the Auckland Domain just before the election to send that message to all the political parties.
A message to end co-governance. It's a touchy subject for some politicians, but not all.
We've been really clear that actually not just co-governance, but tino rangatiratanga for Māori and iwi and hapu is of benefit to all of us as a founding kaupapa of this country.
For now, there are 42 more events planned on the roadshow. Supporters, protesters and police likely preparing to be at all of them. Tia McDougall, News Hub.
So they go like this, look. So there's going to be 42 more events. Police and protesters are going to be at all of them. And, look how dangerous this is. There's going to be cops and most people go, I don't want a night out like that. So that's why we have the filtering. Now, tonight we had some people at the door who were woke. They might be in here still. And anyway, we had this conversation with them, and they were saying, oh, I don't think it's right that you should ban anybody from coming in. And I said, I'm quite happy for you to organise another meeting for me in Nelson, but you pay for the building, you pay for all the sound equipment, and if it all goes wrong, I don't mind just walking out, because the cost and the expense will all be yours. She says, I'm not prepared to do that. And I said, well, you don't know what you're talking about then. And she waddled off. They don't know what it's like. We get one activist in here and they can wreck the meeting. So we have to be very careful because they're costly. And I'm working for the greater good. I'm working for the 100 or so people who are in this room to make sure you come and get what you came for. So I want to protect you. And sometimes I look like a racist. The police should be here. Who's got a phone? You need to ring the cops because they're not supposed to be in this part at all. Okay. You don't have to go outside to ring it. Just ring them from there. No, you can go outside, but just don't. Okay. You know what this is? When you see all this stuff going on out here, this is like co-governance in action. The first thing that's going to go with co-governance is the end of free speech. You're only allowed to talk about what is the approved narrative. And you're not allowed to talk about anything that's not approved. And if you do, you're going to get persecuted. We're going to attack your business. We're going to attack the building where the free speech is going on. And if this keeps going, the final result of this is there will be fines and imprisonment for people who, like Nazi Germany, who are doing stuff. I could come in here and have people just come and take me away and arrest me. And all of you could get a fine because you're here participating. You're like accessories to the fact. So this is the thin end of the wedge. This is the beginning of real bad stuff in this country. This is what you've got out here. You've got tribal rule. Now, here's this lady, this footage. We had a person in that meeting in Orewa who had a camera. And we got footage of what that girl, remember that girl who said, oh, they told me I stink and I was horrible. That girl. Well, we actually filmed her inside the meeting and what she was up to. You know what she was doing? She was going around all the spare seats, ripping up all our books. The police were right in front of her, did nothing. She wasn't taking any notice of what was going on. Remember she said in her little piece, she said, oh, they were misinformed and they were worried. This is the crowd. They were misinformed. She wasn't listening to a thing. How would she know that we were misinformed? They were misinformed. And you know why they were worried? Because of 50 protesters aggressively coming in, trying to have a go at them. Nothing to do with Julian, but the impression is, oh, this is Julian who's misinforming them. He's making them worried. And his supporters, they tell you stink. And you're horrible. So watch this. Look, here, this is the girl. Now we need to turn the sound right down. Link, you know the story. This is me giving a commentary of this. Here's me, and there's the girl. There she is here, right? Got her? That's her. She's picking up the books. She's tearing them up. Watch. There's a policeman just here, watching. Now enter this guy here. He's the guy that said, you stink and you're horrible and you probably stink as well. He tried to stop her from ripping up all our books. He's actually the hero of the story, but he's portrayed as being the villain. Okay, then watch what happens. It's a little bit of a scuffle. He goes back to his seat. The cop's still on that girl's right-hand side. There he is. He's just watching, doing nothing. She goes over, gets in a good position, and just, there's my book. See? Now that is what TV does. It's on my website. It's on my website. Sean Plunkett's going to do something with this. So this is what happens, okay? And we've just been through that. So when you watch TV, it's lights, camera, fiction. That's what you see. My big question to Maori is this. Where are all the good Maori in New Zealand? I've often asked that question. Why are they not stepping up to condemn the appalling behaviour of their own people? Many Maori have come to me privately to say they are ashamed of the protesters and their shocking behaviour. They say they're a blight on Maoridom. The really good Maori in New Zealand, and there are many, say that there's no place in New Zealand for bullying, intimidation, harassment, and denying other people their right to free speech. Good Maori are against co-governance. Do you know that? I just had an email just 2 days ago from a guy who said his grandfather was, great-great-grandfather was number 45 on the Treaty of Waitangi. He said, I'm totally with you. Anything I can do to help you? Tāne Tapuna is a Ngāpuhi elder, wrote to me soon after I started. And he said, I just want to get behind you and help you. He said, in our family, we have a walking stick that was made from the ship, the Boyd. How many know the Boyd story? Okay. He's got this is where the whole ship was eaten and sunk up in the far north. And they've got a walking stick. The reason they don't go public with their views, well, they too will be intimidated and bullied by the shameful thugs, their own people. Welcome to co-governance and tikanga. See, there is a thing in Maoridom where you have groupthink. If you come outside of the group, you get persecuted and bullied. If you say to these guys out here, you're wrong, you get bullied. You're wrong doing this. You'll get attacked and bullied and intimidated until you submit and you fall into line with the group. That's how it works. It's a really, look, this is a dark, dark thing that's happening in this country. How many people here are believers? Go to church. Okay, probably about a third. This is a very, very dark thing that's going on in New Zealand. It's massively dark. Okay. So who else is helping? Well, there's also history-ignorant politicians. Between 1975 and now, we've had politicians on every party who have done ridiculously stupid things for the country with respect to the Treaty of Waitangi and payouts and everything else. And they started off with Bill Rowling in the 1970s, and then it went to Mr. Palmer, and then it went to Mr. Longy, and then it went to Mr. Doug Graham and the National, and then it went to Mr. Finlayson, who was the kingpin guy who just wrecked New Zealand and gave Maori everything they wanted and was furious that when he just wanted to give Maori everything he possibly could, and he had the power to do it. He was extremely dangerous, that guy. And then we had John Key. He was shocker. So it's been everybody. It's been Labour and National. This is like the pin-up boy.
But from the perspective of ratepayers, do you accept this model is not strictly a one-person, one-vote model?
Yes, the proportion of mana whenua is higher than the proportion of the population.
Do you accept that that is not a strictly democratic model?
There are provisions in our laws around the treaty that aren't democratic. Co-governance of the Wanganui and Waikato River, for example. There are provisions that we have in this country that wouldn't stand up to a purely academic democratic framework. But that's not how we work in New Zealand. We recognise that this country was founded on a treaty that gives Māori particular rights and interest in certain things, and what we're proposing here, we believe, recognises that and complies with what previous court rulings have been. We've moved a long way as a country. It's a journey that we're still part way through, but recognising that the democratic system of this country was based on a promise, on a contract, I think that it's on the Crown to observe those obligations and commitments that it made.
Now, that's Mr. McAnulty. He's a cabinet minister with the Labour government, and he's kind of like their front boy at the moment. He's like the pin-up guy, and he sounds confident, sounds believable. And if you're just the average ignorant Kiwi, if you don't know anything about the treaty, you'd go, hey, what he's saying, he's sort of sensible, he's calm, he's rational, he's sort of lovely. But when you look at what he's done, what he actually said, so I analysed this to just pick it apart. In 1 minute and 9 seconds, he makes 6 treaty breaches or breaches of the treaty. He says, quote, the proportion of mana whenua on councils is higher than the general population, unquote. Just because this is so does not make it right. No. The treaty guarantees all New Zealanders equality. If people want to be a city councillor, they must be voted on, period. True? If people want to be a city councillor, they've got to be voted on, yes or no? Absolutely. The rules have got to be the same for everybody. If you have different rules for one group and, and everybody else is treated differently, then, hey, you know what? That's apartheid. That's racism. Number 2, he says there are provisions in our laws that are not democratic. Well, in the Labor government, there's plenty of them because they make them every day. They just think to be undemocratic is now quite normal. It's just fashionable. Labor's made undemocratic stuff fashionable. Just because undemocratic laws, bad laws exist does not make them right. Bad law must be repealed to restore democracy, to restore treaty obligations. Number 3, our country, he said, was founded on a treaty which gives Maoris particular rights and interest in certain things. No, absolutely wrong. Maori ceded sovereignty in the treaty and became a British citizen. The treaty guarantees equal rights for all. No group is to have special rights under the treaty. Next one, number 4. There are provisions, he says, which we have in this country which would not stand up to a strictly academic framework. That's not how we work in this country. Oh, really? Who's he to say? Yeah, who's he to say that? He's wrong. Look, the British established democratic government in New Zealand via the treaty. Any talk of any other form of government is a breach of the treaty. What's the next one? Number 5. He says what we are doing complies with previous court rulings have been. Wrong. The treaty speaks for itself. How many have read the treaty? Do you know what? A little 10-year-old kid could understand that treaty. It's so simple. You don't need a judge to tell you what it means. So activists, judges like Cook, he kicked in, and he should not and mustn't override the plain meaning of the treaty with what he said. Cook said the treaty was akin to a partnership. He did not say it was a partnership, and nor was it a partnership. But Maori activists went on to that, made a big leap, and said it's a partnership. Nobody's pulled them up. Nobody's challenged them. They've taken something somebody said and made a whole big philosophy out of it that's costing us billions. This is fraud. Number 6, he says the democratic system of our country was based on a promise, that's the treaty, on a contract, that's the treaty, and I think that it's on the Crown to observe these obligations and commitments that it made, unquote. The so-called promises McAnulty details are simply not in the treaty. It's obvious he doesn't know what the treaty promises. Let me tell you what it does promise. It promises one law for all. It promises equality before the law for the 160 cultures living here. We've got 160 cultures in this country. Should they be all treated equally? Absolutely they should. All equally. When Maori got 845 million in the budget, and it was for Maori initiatives, that's apartheid. That's one culture getting something that no other culture got. Everybody else is paying taxes. The establishment of a strictly democratic government. Racial harmony. Hobson said, Hei iwi tahi tato, which is we are now one people. We're not two. We are not Maori and the rest. We're all New Zealanders. Is that true, yes or no? Come on. There's no special rights, privileges, handouts for any racial group in the treaty. When this happens, racism and apartheid are being displayed for all to see. Conclusion, McAnulty is breathtakingly ignorant with respect to the treaty. He is spreading racism and apartheid. Who else are we dealing with? Who else is fighting us in this country for the takeover of our nation? Who is aiding the government? Maori activists are. These guys out here have all been radicalised. Yeah? Every week I get an email from a Maori journalist or a Maori activist who said, you should read this. And they all talk about that we didn't cede sovereignty. You guys are only allowed to rule your own people, not allowed to rule us. This is our country. You stole our land. This is our nation. And so on and so on. On it goes. And I go, and Maori say to me, oh, we're not going to listen to you, Julian, because you're Pākehā. We're going to listen to Maori. So if these guys, if Maori activists are radicalising Maori, what's going to happen? This stuff. Here he is. This is the king of the...
is racism.
I have to say this. If you read Article 3 of the treaty in Te Reo Māori, nā tikanga reo te kihitahi.
She then mistranslates
It says that everyone has equal rights and duties under the law.
Relying on the public not speaking te reo Māori, treaty denialists often pretend that Article 3 erases Māori rights. The document itself is very clear. Article 1. Māori give the Crown the right to govern British settlers. At this time, there were 80,000 self-governing Māori and 2,000 settlers with no government. Article 2 affirms that Māori retain their sovereignty and Māori agree to only sell land to the Crown. In return, the Crown agrees in Article 3 to give Māori the same rights as British subjects. Māori and the British both govern themselves under the protection of the Queen. Te Tiriti o Waitangi grants neither side authority to rule the other. Lying about that is racist because it seeks to maintain colonial control at the expense of our rights to self-determination.
See what I mean? So what I did with him is I went through in 1 minute 19 seconds, he tells 10 lies and he tells true truths. Here they are. That lie number 1, his accusation is that non-Maoris say that Article 3 of the treaty erases Maori rights. We've never said that. The truth about it is that no one has ever said this. The opposite is true. It gives Maori the same rights as everyone else. They became British citizens through the treaty. Yeah? Number 2, he implied that if you don't speak Maori, you can't understand the treaty. That's a complete lie. In my book here, I've given you the Treaty of Waitangi, and I've called what I've used is the final draft that was drafted from which the Maori Treaty was made. That's called the Littlewood Draft. It is a mirror image of the treaty in Maori. If you want to know what the treaty in Maori says, you read the Littlewood Draft. And I've got the Littlewood Draft in here for you. You do not need to know Maori to know what the Maori Treaty says. Just read the Littlewood Draft. And I'll tell you how it got that name a bit later. Not true again. Just read the English Littlewood Draft. Number 3, Maori gave the Crown the right to govern British settlers. Oh, really? Maori are described in history as being a primitive Stone Age people by the settlers who came here and historians. Now, you're talking about a primitive Stone Age people saying to the Queen of England, the greatest ruler in the world, the greatest nation in the world, hey, you know what? We'll give you permission. Stone Age, a little group of Stone Age people in the South Pacific. Do you know this? This is so far off the truth. Do you know this? International law at the time allowed, in the rules of colonialism, for colonial countries who were colonizing to come into New Zealand or any other country, wipe out the natives. They could have come here with 10 battleships and 1,000 troops and just killed all the Maori and put a flag up and said, this is our land. And it was totally legal. Do you know that? It's totally legal. So when they say things like this, it's just ridiculous. No, wrong again. Maori ceded sovereignty. Next lie. There were 80,000 self-governing Maori in New Zealand in 1840. Come on. No. Maori were self-annihilating. Cannibalism, slavery, and infanticide were rife. They were fighting each other to death. There was no unifying Maori government, only tribes at war. It was Maori who came to the British wanting a treaty to save them from themselves and the French. Okay, so the next lie is that Maori gave the Crown the right to govern British settlers. Oh, really? Oh, no, they did not. Maori ceded sovereignty. Okay, the next one. Lie number 6, Article 2, Maori retained their sovereignty. No, Maori ceded sovereignty. Then he makes a true statement. He says in Article 2, Maori agreed to sell land to the Crown. That's true. Then he makes another true statement. The treaty agreed to give Maori the same rights as British citizens. That's true. He can't hang in there with lies very long because he's truth, because he's straight back into lies. Maori and the British both govern themselves. No. Maori agreed to be solely governed by the British. You know, what we have today is we have treason. We have Maori saying we want to be the government. We want to take over the country. This is treason. Nothing in this in the treaty. The treaty is so clear about this. They can only be one government in New Zealand, and that is the democratically elected government. Number 8, the treaty gives neither side the authority to rule the other. No. Through cession, Maori gave the British the right to rule over Maori. Number 9, lying about the treaty is racist. In other words, if you say Maori ceded sovereignty in the treaty, you're a liar and you're a racist if you say these things. So what does that do for these little radicals out here? Here's me saying Maori ceded sovereignty. I'm a racist and a liar. They're all radicalized. They don't know anything, these guys. This is the saddest thing you're seeing happening in this country. And it's Maori activists who are creating this. No, speaking the truth about the treaty does not make us racist. Maori ceded sovereignty in the treaty. Conclusion? This activist is leading Maori away from truth and into lies and misinformation. As such, he is doing great damage inside Maoridom. He is working against all non-elite Maori. Then number 10, he says, if you say Maori didn't cede sovereignty, you are undermining the rights of Maori to self-determination. Now, there's a lot said about this self-determination, that little phrase. So I just want to talk about that. Maori currently have the same rights as everyone else to self-determination. Let me explain what I mean. In fact, they have more rights. By self-determination, we mean that each individual person, regardless of race, has the right to choose a path in life and go for it. Is that true, yes or no? If you want to be a nurse or a plumber or an electrician or whatever you want to be, everybody in this country sort of has equal opportunity. In fact, Maori have more. If you want to get into med school, you get a special nibs on it if you're a Maori. Just about every area of life, Maori have special rights. Not equal rights, special rights. True? So, mate, there's no excuse for them not being able to self-determine. By self-determination, we do not mean Maori setting up their own government and country within New Zealand. For this, they have no right. This is tribal rebellion. It's treason, and therefore a glaring breach of the treaty. You know, in the 1860s, the Kingitanga movement got going in New Zealand, and the Crown had to put them down, had to go in and put down the rebellion. And they confiscated land to help pay for the putting down of the rebellion. Because it was treason. The chiefs had agreed to be governed by the British. And this Kingitanga movement said, no, we're going to rebel against that. We want our own government. Just what we've got here, exactly. It's all history repeating itself. It must be stopped. Who else are we fighting? Government departments, which are now run by activists. Let me tell you my own story. The New Zealand Herald did a story on me, a big, huge thing, you know, one whole page. And they said, how did Julian Batchelor get triggered? Like, you know, he's a psychopath. He's a nutcase. How did he get triggered? You know, we need to know this. Triggered, that's the word. What triggered him? Like cracked. So I'll tell you what happened. In 2008, I bought the most beautiful piece of land that was valued at about $6 million in the Bay of Islands. I saved all my life for this piece of land. And, you know, the fact that I bought it in the middle of the most staunch Maori community tells you that I'm not a racist. Because if I was a racist, I wouldn't go into the most staunch Maori community with 99% Maori. I would not have done that. I thought Maori were cool. They were okay. Well, one of those pieces of land, it was in 3 lots, and one of those pieces of land I decided to sell because I wanted to just get rid of a little mortgage. So I rang up Bailey's, said, come and sell this piece of land. Within 1 hour of it being put up, this is 2008, get the dates. It was chopped down with an axe and a whole lot of signs went up, this is Maori land, not for sale. And then this was freehold land. I did a lot of due diligence on that sale. And then I get a ring from the police saying, Julian, you better call off that auction because we've had an email from Maori in Rafferty saying if you don't call it off, there's a busload of Maori coming down from Rafferty. They're going to smash up the auction rooms. Now we've got a security issue. Call off the auction. I went, holy moly, what have we got ourselves into here? This is like brand new to me. I thought Maori were okay, and suddenly there was all this happening. So between 2008 and 2015, there's like this Cold War, like Israel and Palestine. And this, you know, the Maori just wouldn't wave to me. I'd be friendly, and we'd give away appliances and resources and soil and wood and everything. We put it at the bottom of the driveway free. Never got thanked. We were like invisible people. They never talked to us. They were the most racist people that I've ever met. Then in Christmas Eve 2015, 2015, my cell phone goes off at 2 in the morning and there's a sound. The lodge that's on my property had been restored and it's beautiful. We'd put nearly $1 million into it and it was amazing. And 3 South African families rented it with women and children for the holidays. 2 o'clock in the morning, my cell phone went off and there's a sound of smashing glass, screaming, shouting. I said, "Hey, what's going on?" I was in Auckland. They said, "We're having a home invasion. Maori are smashing all the windows. We've got women, children wetting their beds and screaming. Women are terrified." I said, "I'll ring the police and I'll come straight away. I can't do anything else. I'll just ring the cops and I'll get up there." When I arrived, it was like a movie scene. So, smoke rising. And I went around some of the community. I said, "What'd you do that for?" They said, "Your land's stolen." And I said, "Why didn't you talk to me? Why terrorize the children, the kids and the women? What sort of people are you? Why'd you do that?" So what I did, they caused $10,000 worth of damage. So what I did is I'm a bit of a journalist. So I investigated the history of that land. You know what I found? I wrote a 200-page book. I'd love you to read it on the history of that land. It was sold in 1937 outright by a Maori family to a school teacher who'd been working in the community for 17 years, Thomas Thompson. He was like the father of the community. He was the school teacher, the postmaster, the vet, the doctor, everything. They loved him. The whole community turned out in 1937 to support the sale because they loved this man. They wanted him to stay in the community. The total opposite of what Maori today were saying. The land was stolen. It was not. And then I put all the documents, all the source documents in this book, put it online. Absolute silence in the community. They all would have read it. And I said to them, "I'm waiting for you to come up the driveway with 10 grand. I've proved you wrong. Good people put things right." Don't they? Is that true? If they know they're wrong, good people put things right. Dead silence. So I just went, okay, well, I'll just move on, try and forgive them. Hard, but I did. Then in 2018, we're doing some more work on the property. A Maori woman comes up the driveway. We don't see anybody, and then suddenly somebody comes up the driveway. And she got hold of me, and there was a 1080 HD camera right behind me with perfect sound. She engaged me, and she said, "I want my land back." And so she engaged my arms, and she started raking her fingernails. She's about this size, She started raking her fingernails down here, so I had blood all down both arms, all caught on camera. The police got the footage. She went to court. There's a gallery like this watching. And the judge puts down his gravel and says, "I'm going to let you off." And the whole crowd went, "What?" Because they watched the footage and they were aghast. They were like, "This is serious." And the police just went, "Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Batchelor." You know what that was about? Judges were being appointed by the Labour government, told to let Maori off so they could get the statistics down to make the Labour government look good. She went back to Rāwhiri, "Hey, kia ora, I got off," which sent a message to everybody: you can assault Julian, no consequences. You can just assault him, no problem. Fast forward, by the way, every single 6 months between 2008 2023, somebody put videos on YouTube saying that I was desecrating their urupa, chopping down trees, everything. Just terrible propaganda videos, one after the other. They wanted to bring hate. Hate. All of it was to try and get the land. And so that was another incident. Then in 2022, last year, this was like one of the major ones that got me triggered. Another lady came up the driveway, said, "Can I have a chat with you?" And I said, "Sure, I'll leave the door open." And I always wanted to just keep everything open, keep communicating with if they wanted to. They were trying to break me down, make me submit to tribal rule, and just cave in. So she came up the drive on the next day, 10 o'clock, and we sat down, we had some small talk. Now, I had my cell phone with me, and I thought, I'm going to record this. So I had my cell phone recording everything, and we had some small talk. And then she says, "I'm just going to cut to the chase. Just me and her. just me and her on the deck. And she said, if you don't give us your land, we're going to burn your house down. I went, oh, really? I said, oh, really? She said, yep, we're going to burn your house down. And I said, why would I give you my land? She said, because we want it. I said, no, you can't have it. And so the conversation went on I said, I worked all my life for that land. I'm not just going to give it away. If you want it, you got to buy it. That's how you do things. This is 2023. This is not pre-1840. We're living in a modern world. If you want land, you got to buy it. Oh no, they just want it. So I gave that footage to the police, the recording, and it went to one inspector to the other. They came back and they said, I'm sorry, Mr. Batchelor, we can't charge anybody. You know what the reason was? She didn't say, I am going to burn the house down. She said, we are. And then the clincher. This was the final clincher. Last year, I got a letter from Heritage New Zealand, out of the blue. This is government department, which is like a Maori activist centre in Wellington. And the letter said this, Dear Mr. Batchelor, your land has been reclassified as Waihi Tapu. It's now sacred Maori land. So I wrote back to them and I said, no way is that going to happen. What's the appeal process? They said, you can appeal in 3 years. I said, how do you justify this? They said, there's some bodies dragged across the land in 1775. I said, yes, you need to prove that. So what effectively happened was, I pay the rates. They've got control. They can walk all over my land, do everything they want. I pay the rates. They have control. If I want to do anything on the land, I've got to get their permission. At that point, they sent me an email. Some foolish little person inside Heritage New Zealand sent me an email, and there was correspondence. You know, as you go through the email trail, at the very bottom between locals and Heritage New Zealand. And it basically said this, high five, bro. We got the land. Should we come up for a feed in the marae? At that point, I had a pencil in my hand. I snapped it, and I threw it around the room, and I said, I'm mobilising. I'm mobilising. This could happen to anybody. I'm telling you. And I was in Tauranga. This is. We've got footage of this. There's a guy in Tauranga put his hand up and said, can I say something? I said, sure. He said, our land's just been reclassified. I said, why? What happened? He said, our land, we got this letter saying your land is in the flight path of the Kereroo. I'm serious. So your land has now been reclassified. It's now basically under Maori control. You can't appeal. It's all part. This is the thing. This is a takeover of our country. So I got a website going. I said, I'm mobilising. I got a website going that you've seen now. I've got the website. And just before I went live on this, I thought, you know what? This could get messy. They know my name. They know where I live. Everything about me is just out there. And then I thought, the good book says this, no man builds a tower without counting the cost. So I said, what could happen to me? They could burn my house down. How would I feel about that? I went, I'm okay about that. It's insured. We'll just build another one. Then I thought, okay, they could kill me. How would I feel about that? You know what came into my mind? Because I'm a Christian, there's a little Bible verse shot into my mind. Don't fear him who can kill the body. Fear him who can kill both body and soul in hell. He who loves his life will lose it. He who hates his life will gain it. And at that point, I went, I believe that was a word from God. God was talking. So I'm going live. Immediately, fear left me. And I thought, they've got nothing on me. They can't get me for anything. I'm training up people all around the country to do these seminars. If they kill me, I've got 6 others taking my place. It's like kicking a dandelion. They're going to have to kill a lot of people to stop this now. I'm not afraid of these guys. Activism and education system, the brainwashing of young people at kindergartens right up to university. European lawyers and consultants who have sold their soul in the country for filthy lucre. Do you know that the Three Waters legislation cost $50 million in consultants? There's a lot of Europeans getting rich out of this, and they don't care about the country, they just want their money. activism in local councils. We had something put on our car last night with seminars being held by the Nelson Council on the Treaty of Waitangi. $30 each, come along. You know what that'll be? Brainwashing. In the Hamilton City Council, new councillors had to have a 3-day cultural safety seminar with people, Maori, who came in to teach them. And they had body cams on as they taught, so they could keep records of people who could be rebellious. Then they went out to sacred sites, so-called sacred sites, around the Waikato, and they had women, Maori women, crying. This is honestly, this is 1920s and 1930s Nazi Germany. This is unbelievable. Then you've got Christian churches who have become woke and PC, history ignorant, all the while thinking that in running with co-governance they are putting a smile on the face of God. They are not. Churches are supposed to fight against darkness, deceit, trickery, not run with it. You know what? I can't even get into a church to speak. I ring them up and they go like this: Julian Batchelor here, I'd like to come into your church and just use the building when you're not using it. Oh, you can't do that. We're bicultural. I said, no, we're not. We're multicultural. Do you have any idea what's going on here in New Zealand? Praise the Lord. I'm serious. They're so lost. They've just got swept up in all this, and they think it's cool to be woke. And I'm a Christian. Here's me knocking the church. I'm saying to the church, it's inviting judgment on itself. The laid-back nature of European Kiwis whose mantra is she'll be right until they taste tribal rule, and then the tears will flow in the gutters of our streets. This is going to end really badly. So who is co-governance? Who are we fighting for? Well, we're fighting for the 160 cultures who live here: Chinese, Indians, Africans, Russians, Czechs, Japanese, Samoans, French, Australians, Tongans, Germans, Croatians, Belgians, British, South Americans, Koreans, South Africans, Italians, Niueans, Filipinos. These are all people, we're all equal. True? Are we all equal? Did all these kind of people help build New Zealand? They all did, man, I'll tell you. So we're going to have a break in a minute. We'll have a cup of tea. I'll just go through 2 more slides. This is Tipene O'Regan, the Ngāi Tahu leader. So Tipene O'Regan has been known to hint that if the Ngāi Tahu and other claims before the Waitangi Tribunal are not met, there was a danger that Maori activists may resort to violence to achieve their objectives. What's that saying? That's a statement of war. If you don't give us what we want, we're going to get violent. Here's Ken Meir, the leader of the militant Te Aha Kaha group. He says this: we will take back our country by any means. He's been radicalised. He has no idea what the treaty says. The Maori Party has clear goals. Here's Waititi. He said this: it has a 25-year plan. They want self-management, self-determination and self-governance across all their domains. They want a separate Maori parliament with 15 to 17 seats and control over $20 billion of annual self-managed spending. Now, do you know what? 20 billion, a billion is 1,000 million. They want 20,000 million every year so they can run their own ship. Wait a minute, that's a very good question. This lady said, where are they going to get their 20 billion? You are going to pay. Now, this is what they want. Look, this is what they're gunning for. The Dunedin Hospital is the most state-of-the-art modern hospital in the country. It's going to cost $1.4 billion. You could get 14 of those for this $20 billion every year. Every year. 14 of them. Would that help a lot of Kiwis, yes or no? I looked at the cost of the Puhoi to Warkworth road extension. It's beautiful. It's not even opened yet, but it's going to be amazing. That cost $1 billion. You could get 20 roads like that. You know the road between Kapiti and Wellington? That new road? I think it's amazing. We could get 10 of those. But no. Maori want the 20 billion just to run the whole thing. And we're going to work, pay taxes, and we're just going to give it to them. Is that going to happen, yes or no? Shit. Excuse me. We have to march. We're going to stop this. This is out of control. Abolishing full and final treaty settlements. He doesn't want full and final treaty settlements. Handing back all conservation land to Maori. Here's all my references. This was an interview he had with the Guardian newspaper in England. Stuart C. Scott, who's a lawyer and a historian, everything I have in here is referenced, academically referenced. I'm not making any of this up. Claiming has become an integral part of the Maori way of life. The thought of the extinction of further claiming rights by final settlements is abhorrent to the race. Maoridom does not want settlement. It wants to nurse its grievances and continue its claiming ad infinitum. Well, we're going to have a coffee break, but I'll just read this and then we'll go. The push by tribal leaders for co-governance and partnership, if it's not stopped, is going to destroy New Zealand. Destroy us. So what's co-governance? I'm going to take you through about 5 or 6 slides after you had a coffee break to explain what co-governance is, and then we're going to move into the treaty, because you've got to know the treaty. I must teach you the treaty. That's the best part. So hang in there, go and have a cup of tea, and you've been very good so far. So far. Thank you. Go and get your cup of tea. Okay, you've got your cup of tea. We've had a little bit of a break and a little bit of a... Is everybody okay? We're all okay? Okay, we're into the really serious stuff now. I'm giving you the context, like a frame round a picture. I'm telling you about what we're fighting, the extent of the battle. It's massive. So here is what co-governance is all about. This is Nanaia Mahuta. By the way, we've got video on our website of Nanaia Mahuta who got one of our books. Yeah. Somebody in a shopping centre gave her one and she did about a 1-minute clip with her talking about the book, this book, my book. She says, oh, it's just propaganda. She hasn't read it. And she goes, oh, you know, it's going to be wonderful with Maori in control and we're good at conservation and we're good at bringing up families and we're wonderful and we're, you know, blah, 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 blah. And so, honestly, they've all been told to say these things. Yeah, but a PR company has told them to say that everything's going to be wonderful with Maori in control. So what does it mean for government? I'm going to rip through this. 2 complete governments that overlap. A new written constitution based on a new interpretation of the Treaty of Waitangi. How do you get a new interpretation of the Treaty of Waitangi? At least 50% of all procurement contracts must now go to Maori businesses. In other words, any government department now must have at least 5% of all its procurements go to government departments. All government departments, agencies must now provide a report that show at least 5% of the procurement of goods and services was from a Maori business. What is that? That's apartheid. Yeah? Is that apartheid? You have to buy from a Maori business now, okay? Next one, media. We've talked about this, the $55 million fund. Media outlets want a slice of this. There are strict conditions. We talked about that. You cannot present a point of view that opposes the government's race-based agenda. News must cover stories that support the government's approved narrative. How many see more and more Maori actors on the adverts? Okay, you know, doubtless, you know that girl who just suddenly appeared on the TV station, on the TV3 News? You know what? I bet you... Because in that $55 million public interest journalism fund contract, if you didn't meet certain thresholds, they could recall the loan. They could recall it. So I wouldn't mind betting that TV3 got a call saying you haven't got enough Maori content on your TV station. You need to up it. We want a Maori weather reporter. Otherwise, we'll recall your loan. And they go, we can't afford to repay them back. We'll go bust. No, it was a grant, but in the fine print it said if you don't meet the threshold of Maori content on your TV station, your radio or your newspaper, we can recall the loan. So they're being monitored to see how much Maori content, and every now and then they get some sort of communication from the government saying you haven't got enough Maori content, you need to up it. That's why more and more, te reo and everything is spoken on TV and radios, newspapers, weather forecasts, everything. They were trapped. This is a corrupt government. They're unbelievable. This is friggin', it's hard to believe it's true. This is all apartheid. What does it mean for Dockland? Transfer ownership and control of the entire conservation strait to tribal authorities. The Department of Conservation now has an options development group. That's how to give land to Maori. This group has made a recommendation to give full control and governance of DOC to Maori. This means when you want to go to a forest, you want to go to a lake or a river, you're going to have to pay an iwi tax. In the Hauraki Gulf right now, Maori have got zones, only Maori can fish in there, and if you fish in there, they've got fizz boats, they can fine you. Government rezones privately owned land and gives right over it to Maori. That's what happened to me. This is all lifetime. Education, rewriting New Zealand's history, skipping the Muscat Wars and pre-Maori history, showing pre- and post-European Maori is different from what was observed and recorded by early Europeans, teaching critical race theory. Maori are good, white people are bad. We had a mother who came into this meeting, said her 10-year-old son came home and said, I don't want to be a white person anymore, I want to be a Maori. Yeah. And the reason was, they said, because, you know, we've been so bad to Maori, white people have been so bad to Maori, they're getting taught to hate being white. Teaching racial bias, teaching primary school children without Maori ancestry to feel ashamed. I don't want my kid doing that. Health. 2 healthcare systems, Maori healthcare system, funded by the taxpayer, decision-making and veto rights over the entire health system, Maori patients prioritised, that's apartheid. I had somebody talk to me in the break just here, saying that they're with a hospital, they're a consultant, they've been told officially by the government, somebody in this meeting tonight, they've been told officially by the government they must prioritise Maori patients. Now no longer according to need, it's according to your colour of your skin. What do you call that? Apartheid. I had 2 people who I know, sisters, they're in their 50s, they're Maori, but sort of like half-caste Maori, they don't look Maori, but they are. They went in, and one of them had a mental health issues. The good one, the one who was well, took the one who had issues into the hospital. They were filling out some forms about what's your ethnicity, you know. And she said, we're Maori. And the nurse said, what are you doing here? You should be at the Maori one. They said, well, this is fine. We're okay. They said, no. You go to the Maori one, they pick you up with a taxi, take you home with a taxi, ask if you need a food voucher, $200 from Pack and Save. You get treated like royalty. They said, no, we're happy with this, because they don't want all the Maorification stuff that goes with it. Justice. 2 justice systems, a Maori court system where offenders with a Maori ancestry will be treated differently from other offenders. 2 jail systems, Maori jails where inmates with a Maori ancestry will be treated differently from other inmates. Western common law replaced by tikanga, that's Maori customs and practices. People of Maori ancestry will have greater legal rights. It's apartheid. What does it mean for water? Granting Maori rights to all fresh water. Councils pay Maori for water. Water costs and rates will go up. Giving Maori funding to cover all legal costs to claim the seabed and foreshore from mean high tide out to 12 miles out. Opponents to Maori must find their own legal costs. If I want to fight that stuff on my land, you know what I got to do? I got to fund all the legal costs. Maori get all this paid. It's apartheid. What does it mean for local councils? Iwi have decision-making and veto rights, the abolition of the right of local communities to hold a binding referendum on Maori ward seats. Local government Minister Mahuta is now undertaking a review, and it appears likely to lead to 50% of council seats being held by Maori, just people appointed, not voted on. Apartheid. So I want to know this, is all of this legal constitution, or is it just a coup? Well, you know, to answer these questions, we have to go back to the Treaty of Waitangi, which has become, rightly or wrongly, our country's founding document. So, here are the main players in the treaty. This is the main part of the seminar you're about to see, so don't nod off, because this is huge. Do you know what? I've got to get you good at the treaty, and the reason is this. They tell me that people who want to pick up fraudulent banknotes spend all day just looking at the real notes so that they become absolute experts at it, and then when a fraudulent one comes along, they're so good with the real ones, they can pick a fraudulent one very quickly. So I want to teach you about the treaty, so what you hear out there in the public, you become so good at it, you can pick up fraud straight away. Is that fair enough? Yeah. Okay, here we go. This is Lord Normanby. He was very close to the Queen, very powerful person, and he was Secretary of the Colonies. So pretty much like Henry Kissinger was in the American administration during his time. Very powerful. And he was the one who sent Hobson to New Zealand. And when he sent him to New Zealand, he gave him a 4,200-word brief about what he was to do. These were orders. These were like military orders. You don't disobey these. It was written on the 14th of August, 1839 in Britain, and it was written by the Under-Secretary of Lord Normanby, a guy called James Stephens, but it was scrutinised and approved by Normanby. And so it was given to Hobson, and Hobson set sail for New Zealand on the 25th of August, 1839. Remember, came to New Zealand, the treaty is 1840, February. So he has plenty of time to go over this 4,200-word brief given to him by Lord Normanby. This is Hobson. Then we have Busby. He was sent here by the British to try and sort out New Zealand because they had interest in New Zealand. And he was called the British resident. He arrived here in 1833. Remember, you just keep in mind that the treaty is 1840. So he's been here for 7 years before the treaty. And he worked with Maori chiefs in Northland, and he tried to bring pretty much what the Treaty of Waitangi tried to bring in 1835 through the Declaration of Independence, but it never went anywhere, it was never ratified by the British government, and it just fell over. In fact, he was seen as a bit of a failure, really. But he was here. Now, Freeman was picked up in Sydney by Hobson, because Hobson, as I said, left England on the 25th of August, 1839, and he arrived in Sydney, and he met with Governor Gibbs, because that had become a colony, Australia, and they discussed official business. And then Hobson picked this guy up who became Hobson's like PA or secretary. And he left Sydney on the 19th of January, 1840, from Sydney. Get that? They arrive in New Zealand on the 29th of January, 1840. In other words, it took 10 days to sail from Sydney to Paihia. And they weighed anchor on the 29th of January. Now, how many days in January? 31. So they had 3 days left in January, 29, 30, 31. When was the treaty signed? The 6th. So they had 6 days in February, 3 in January. That means they had 9 days to get the treaty together. It's a short period of time. This guy, Clendon, he was the US ambassador. He was actually British, but he was here because America had interest in this country, in this area, and he was acting for the American government. And he had to send communications back to America to tell him what was happening. So he was very close, he got very close to Hobson, especially to Busby, because they were here together, these two, in New Zealand before Hobson even arrived. And then we have this guy here, who's an absolute hero. He's called Henry Williams, and he was the guy that had been here since 1923, 17 years, working as a missionary among Maori and Europeans to bring Christianity to the Maori. And he was absolutely fluent in Te Reo and could speak it like no one else could. And he was the guy that translated the final English draft into Maori. And then you have this guy here called Reverend Taylor, and I'll tell you about him. On the night of the 5th of February, he was instructed by Hobson to take the treaty in Maori and write it on dogskin. Ready for the ceremony on the 6th. So he's the guy that was the dogskin man. This is Colenso. It's like he hadn't washed his hair for quite some time, but that's okay. Colenso was the official printer for the British. He had a printing press in Paihia, and he was also the guy who took the notes in the treaty tent at Waitangi on the 6th of February, recording everything every chief said. It's amazing what he did. He was very clever and very meticulous. Now, this was Lord Normanby's instruction to Hobson. This is of crucial importance if you want to understand the treaty and everything that's happening in New Zealand. In fact, this is almost more important than the treaty. Remember, he gave this instruction to Hobson before he left on the 25th of August 1839. And he said this: the Queen disclaims any pretension to seize the islands of New Zealand. Stop right there. That's a massive statement. Colonialism, like I said previously, had been about going into a country, conquering, killing all the people, and putting up a flag and saying this is now our country. It becomes a colony. The Queen had been Christianized. Christianity was sweeping through England, and there was a group called the Evangelicals. In fact, Lord Normanby's relative was one of those people, and this Great Britain had become pretty much like a place where revival was happening. Prison reform had happened. Child labour reform had happened. The slave trade was abolished in 1838. And so the Queen was now looking at colonisation with completely different eyes. And she said this. Did I say 1838? It was abolished in 1838. She said, the Queen disclaims every pretension to seize the islands. She's not going to be like a warmonger coming in and just taking them. She says this: unless the free intelligent consent of the natives expressed according to their established usages shall first be obtained. She says, we're going to work with the natives, we're going to get their consent, the Maori, we're going to get their consent and work with them, because the Queen is now a Christian. No more war, no more plundering, work with them. This is amazing stuff. This is so different from British international policy. It had changed. Maori were lucky. If this had happened in 1830, there'd be no Maori here today. You will therefore frankly and unreservedly explain the reasons which should urge them to acquiesce. Acquiesce to what? Here it is. This is the most crucial thing you must take home tonight. The impossibility of Her Majesty extending to them, that's the Maori, any effectual protection unless the Queen be acknowledged as the sovereign of their country. What's this word? Hold on to that word, impossibility. It's huge. They were told, if you don't get sovereignty, Hobson, it's impossible for us to keep going in New Zealand. You get that? Now hold on to that. This is crucial. Maori came to the British and said, we're fearful of the French and of each other. We're self-annihilating. The Maori population between 1800 and 1840 went down from 150,000 to 70,000. It was pretty much cut in half. And it was Maori killing Maori. Now, they also had a huge fear of the French. How did that happen? In 1722, French explorer Dufresne had come to these shores, and he'd anchored in a bay and broken a tapu, and some of his sailors had gone ashore, 26 of them in total, including Dufresne, and they were murdered and eaten. There must have been more of them who escaped, but 26 were captured, killed and eaten by Maori. So the French went and set up a military hospital on Motutua Island, which is just out in the Bay of Islands where I live, probably less than half a k from my house. They set up this military hospital, and one night, walkers full of Maori came to that island to attack the French. Now the French were prepared. They had guns. Maori had never seen a gun before. This is 1722. 250 Maori were shot and killed. Maori had never seen this. Those who escaped, who lived through this, went back onto the mainland, and they spread this story about these people who had come to New Zealand with fire sticks, guns, who could kill people without a spear or a Patu. And this great fear of the French swept through New Zealand. And so the Maori were saying they were afraid of the tribe of Marion who were going to come back, kill everybody and take New Zealand. Like in a classic colonial fashion. Kill all the Maori, take your land and call it yours. Now, with that in mind, watch this. Here's Waitangi. That was Busby's house. When Hobson arrived in his ship, he would have anchored probably off here because he had to go and see him. And I want to be clear about a few things. There's only one treaty, not multiple treaties. There's only one treaty. The treaty is the treaty in Maori. Okay? I'm all for this treaty. I'm for this treaty being interpreted as it was originally intended. Let's go back to the original meaning. International law dictates that the treaty in Maori takes precedence over anything written in English. At the moment, the Waitangi Tribunal, which recommends to the government huge payouts to Maori for this, that and everything, they're using a rogue James Freeman version of the treaty. I won't go into that, but James Freeman started to write versions of the treaty himself. He was the secretary of Hobson. No, it's okay. The other thing they're doing is they're using the Hugh Kafaru version of the treaty. Okay. So, the treaty makes no mention of partnership or co-governance. Let me show you. I will briefly explain the sequence of events leading up to the signing of the treaty. So what happened? Well, this is Lord Normanby, and I've told you about Hobson and their relationship, and Busby and Freeman and Clendon and Williams and Taylor and Colenso. Now, here's the guts of what happened. On the 1st of February, remember they got here on the 29th of January? For 3 days, 29th, 30th, 31st, these three men started writing, Clendon, Busby, Hobson and Freeman started writing the treaty. Hobson had a terrible row on the 1st of February with the captain of his ship, HMS Herald, and he was bedridden. Hobson was bedridden. He had been to the West Indies on various occasions and had 3 bouts of yellow fever. He was a weak man. This row with Captain Nias put him in bed. Busby heard about it and said, do you want me to finish writing the treaty? He said, yes, that would be wonderful. I'll stay in bed. I need to recover. And he did that. So the 1st, 2nd and 3rd, Busby alone wrote the treaty. On the 3rd of February, he had a clean draft ready to show Hobson. Hobson came ashore on the 4th. They were getting close to treaty time. On the 4th of February, Hobson, Clendon and Busby met with Williams. Freeman was excluded. That's hugely important. Why was that? Because Freeman wanted to write flowery, elaborate treaties, and they said this will be no good for Maori. They won't understand them. You just go and sunbathe on the beach. And he was excluded. It's very important. On that day, the 4th of February, these men went over the treaty to make sure it was exactly what they wanted to say, and at 4 o'clock on the 4th of February, they gave it to Henry Williams, the translator, to translate into Maori. He went off into the evening and translated it. The next morning, the 5th of February, Clendon, Hobson, Busby and Williams met in the morning of the 5th, and they went over the Maori treaty, and I guess they would have asked each other questions. These guys would have asked him questions. Are you sure this means sovereignty? Are you sure that's, everything, seeding, possessions, all the key words, kawanatanga, tino rangatiratanga, everything. We want to get this right. In the morning, they made a decision that they would go and read this to the chiefs. First reading was on the 5th of February, midday. They read it in English first and then Maori, because many of the Maori were familiar with English. Honiheka had been to England back. So on the 5th of February, it's read. Maori are all in the chiefs are in the tent, and in the evening, all the Maori retired to Titi'i Marae at Waitangi to discuss the treaty. Who went with them? Henry Williams and his son. Now, here's a key thing. One of the great things that I want to show you is this. What the chiefs actually said in the tent at Waitangi, because on the 6th of February, the chiefs came back from their marae and they said, we're ready to sign. Hobson couldn't believe it. This is the 6th of February. At midday, the signing ceremony started and some of the chiefs said, we're not going to sign. We don't want this treaty. I think that's one of the greatest apologetics as to the genuineness of what happened in Waitangi on the 6th of February. Because they recorded what the chiefs said when they disagreed with Hobson. This is what the first speaker was Te Kemera, chief of the Ngāti Kafa tribe. He said this, health to thee, O governor. I am not pleased towards thee. In other words, I don't want this treaty. I shall never say yes to you staying. I don't want the treaty. Were we to be an equality, he uses the wrong word, but that's the word he used. Were we to be an equality, in other words, equal, then perhaps Te Kemera would say yes. But for the governor to be up, 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 and Te Kemera be down, governor high, up, 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 and for Te Kemera down, low, small, a worm, a crawler, no, 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 oh governor. What's he talking about? Sovereignty. Is that true? Yes or no? He knows that this is about giving sovereignty to the British, and he would have to be relegated to be an ordinary citizen. Te Huhu refused to sign, his reason being that it would place the mana of Te Huhu beneath the feet of a woman. The Maori present at Waitangi understood what was meant by kawanatanga. Kawanatanga is the Maori word for sovereignty, is evident from the remark of one chief that if kawanatanga was ceded, he would thereafter have to ask permission of the British authorities to paddle his canoe across the river. What does that tell you? They knew what sovereignty was all about. These guys were saying, I don't want this. I can't be you up there, me down here. I want to be the boss. Henry Williams, he said this, reported to Bishop Selwyn later, the instruction of Captain Hobson was not to allow anyone to sign the treaty till he fully understood it, to which instruction I most strictly attended. That the natives to whom I explained the treaty understood the nature of the same, there can be no doubt. This is the guy who was in the tent on the 5th of February all night with the chiefs discussing it. This was what he wrote in his diary. That the natives to whom I explained the treaty understood the nature of the same, there can be no doubt. He just wrote that in his diary. Now, hang on. Sometime after the 6th of February, this was the final English draft that was written by Busby. This was what was used to make the treaty in Maori, Te Tiriti. The treaty in Maori and this final English draft are almost a mirror image. There's only two differences between this draft and the treaty in Maori. Do you know what they are? One is the date. What's the date on the draft? What do you think it would be? The 4th. The 4th, because that's the day the draft was made. Remember, get this? The 4th, the draft is finalised. The 5th, it's turned into Maori language. The 6th, it's signed. 4th, 5th, 6th. Now, this is in the handwriting of Busby. It's on W. Tucker 1833 paper. That paper was only found in Clendon's house. So we know that this final draft was constructed on the 4th of February inside Clendon's house. Of crucial importance is the final English draft. After making a copy to send to his superiors in the USA, and after the Williams were finished with it, Clendon gave this final draft to his lawyer, Henry Littlewood. Sometime after February the 6th, Clendon made a copy of this, sent it to his superiors in America. Now, it's exactly the same as this, except that Clendon fixed a couple of spelling mistakes up. Busby spelt sovereignty wrongly. Clendon fixed it. Then what happened was this. Clendon took the final English draft, this, and gave it to his lawyer called Henry Littlewood. Henry Littlewood was a lawyer who was working out of Paihia, and he said to Henry Littlewood, I've made a copy to send to my superiors. We've used this to make the treaty in Maori. Here it is here, just store it for me. We don't need it anymore. We're only interested in the treaty in Maori. That's the one the chiefs are going to sign. It was lost, this, until 1989 when it was found in the house of the relatives of Henry Littlewood in Pukekohe. It was found in a linen cupboard. They were pulling out some linen from the linen cupboard, and out fell an envelope with the Treaty of Waitangi written on the back of it. They opened it up and they went, oh my goodness, what's this? Thankfully, the person who found it had the foresight to take copies of it, photographs. It was given to the government, and the government have hidden it. You know why? Because this makes no mention of forests and fisheries. It cuts out forests and fisheries. The Maori Treaty doesn't have forests and fisheries, but the ones that the tribunal are using, the James Freeman version in English and the Hugh Carfrey version, both have forest and fisheries. The true treaty does not have forests and fisheries. So Maori goes, we get a lot more from forests and fisheries if we keep that in there. We can have the lot. It matches the Maori version almost perfectly. It makes no mention of forests and fisheries. Why was it hidden out of sight? It threatened to end the gravy train. Politicians under pressure from activists said, you've got to hide this, don't let it out. It's in Archives New Zealand and it's hidden. Forensic evidence shows that this was the final English draft, and if you want to know what the treaty in Maori says, you just read that draft. That is in my book, here. Where's my book? Thank you, you haven't got it, you let me down. Oh, they're right here. There's the book, it's in here. This is in the book. Now, watch how this works. Here's the preamble of the treaty, the actual treaty. Her Majesty Queen of England, in her gracious consideration for the chiefs and people of New Zealand, look, gracious consideration, not a warmonger, not somebody coming in killing all the people, and her desire to preserve them their land. She could have just taken their land with international law and said, it's ours. She had every right to do that, but she says she's going to preserve them their land. She said, we're going to let Maori have their land and we'll buy it from them. Do you get this? Shivers. And to maintain peace and order among them. We're going to protect them from the French and we're going to protect them from each other. This is amazing. It has been pleased to appoint the officer to treat with them for the cession of their sovereignty of their country and of the islands adjacent to the Queen, to the Queen. So we're going to have sovereignty. We're going to protect you. We're going to give you let you have your land. We're going to protect you against the French and each other, but we want sovereignty. Seeing that already many of Her Majesty's subjects have already settled in the country, that's British people coming to New Zealand, and are constantly arriving, and that it is desirable for their protection as well as the protection of their natives to establish a government among them. She says, we're going to establish a government for the Maori. So we'll help them sort themselves out. They're just killing each other, we'll help them. Her Majesty has accordingly been pleased to appoint William Hobson, a captain of the Royal Navy, to be governor of such parts of New Zealand as may now or hereafter be ceded to Her Majesty. Ceded. Go back to Normanby. It's impossible for the British to carry on if they don't get sovereignty. That's what he said. Now, here we go. Here's Article 1. the chiefs of the Confederation of the United Tribes and the other chiefs who had not joined the Confederation cede to the Queen of England forever the entire sovereignty of their country. Why is it number one, the first article? You know why? Clendon and Hobson and Busby would have sat down and went, you know what? Let's get Normanby's book out. He told me, this is what Hobson would have said. Normanby said, it's impossible for us to carry on in New Zealand unless we get sovereignty. So the first priority, sovereignty. Let's make that number one. Cede means to give up or give somebody control. Sovereignty means government or complete power to govern a country. Does this article teach, instruct, convey the idea that Maori would be self-determined, having their own government, or that the Queen entered into a partnership with Maori? Yes or no? No. Okay. Now, if we extrapolate out the words cede and sovereignty, this is how the article reads. The chiefs of the Confederation of United Tribes and the other chiefs who have not joined the Confederation give up to the Queen of England forever the entire right to govern their country. Maori have taken back that right. This is their country, they say. We're now going to govern it. This is treason. They ceded sovereignty. Co-governance? No, it's impossible from Article 1. Partnership? No, it's impossible from Article 1. Now, who else says this? Sir Apartheid, the greatest Maori who's ever lived in New Zealand. He was an MP in the 1920s and 30s. He had a law degree in 2 years instead of 3. He had a doctorate of literature, fluent in Te Reo. He went round all the maraes in New Zealand teaching about the Treaty of Waitangi because Maori said, we want our land back. In the 1920s and 30s, Maori was saying, we want all our land back. And he was saying, you know what, guys? Watch what he says. He says, tough luck, you sold it. You gave it, you sold it. You can't have it back. And they were going, oh, we want it back. Damn it, we shouldn't have sold it. How many people in this room sold land and thought, I wish I had it now that I could sell it again? How many would like to do that? That's what's happening. I'm serious. Watch what he says. This is Sir Apartheid. Look. It was the first article of the treaty which transferred the chiefly authority of your ancestors, affecting you and future generations forever. The treaty made one law for the Maori and Pākehā. If you think things are wrong, they were complaining, we want all our land back, and bad, then blame our ancestors who gave away their rights in the days when they were very powerful. He says, get over it. Your ancestors gave it away, mate. You got to live with it. What's the government saying today? Oh, we did wrong. We're going to have to pay out. It's right to pay out. Over and over. Do you know that full and final settlements were achieved in 1960? Justice Sim, between 1923 and 1950, late 50s, they achieved full and final settlements with Maori, and it was all opened up again in 1975 with the Treaty of Waitangi Act. Watch this. He goes on and he says this. This was the transfer by Maori, this is the treaty, this was the transfer by the Maori chiefs to the Queen of England forever of the government of their lands. It is the absolute authority over the Maori people which the article, that's Article 1, transmits into the hands of the Queen and the Parliamentary Council. The main purport was the transferring of the authority of the Maori chiefs for making laws to their respective tribes and sub-tribes under the Treaty of Waitangi to the Queen of England forever. What does he say? They ceded sovereignty, doesn't it? Enter this guy, Hugh Kāwhuru, 1989, the Kingpin Treaty Crista. I can't believe this happened, but it did. In 1989, Hugh Kāwhuru was invited by the government of the day to attempt to reconstruct the literal translation of the treaty. Maori went along and they said, you know what? Can we have the chance to just say what the treaty might have meant to the Maori chiefs? Can we just say, do this? Can we write it out, what we think they might have been thinking? And the government went like this. Why not? That seems pretty harmless. Tell you what, Maori, from my experience, Maori are very cunning, very clever. He was a Maori, Hikafu, a tribunal member and a claimant. Talk about conflict of interest. This is like asking the mongrel mob to be in charge of the ports of Auckland. Hard to believe this happened and it was allowed, but it did. Labour's David Lange was PM at the time. I think David must have been just distracted. So, this is what he said. The word sovereignty is a translation of the Maori word kawanatanga. Get this? This word had been in use for many years before 1840 and Maori would have been familiar with it. Why? The 13 Ngāpuhi chiefs with Busby, who tried to get it all together in 1831 and 1835, were using sovereignty. But Kāwhuru maintained that Maori did not know what this word meant. He maintained that Maori did not cede sovereignty. This is nonsense. They knew this word meant sovereignty. How do we know this? We must examine the facts. Just look at the facts. First, we must look at what, as we have already done, what the chiefs actually said on February the 6th, 1840, which was meticulously minuted by Colenso. Second, we must look at other historical documents and events. One of those events was the 1860 Ko-Marama Conference. Here it is. 112 chiefs met for a month in 1860 at the Ko-Marama Conference, and they moved and passed a series of resolutions. They were unanimous that they ceded sovereignty to the Queen at Waitangi in 1840. This is the actual document. Look what it says. Look, look, look. Proceedings of the Ko-Marama Conference, that this conference takes cognizance of the fact that the several chiefs, members thereof, are pledged to each other to do nothing inconsistent with their declared recognition of the Queen's sovereignty and of the union of the two races, we're all one people, also to discontinuance all proceedings tending to a breach of the covenant, that's the treaty, so we're not going to do anything that's going to breach the treaty, here solemnly entered into by them, resolution carried unanimously. Many of these chiefs had been at Waitangi. This was only 20 years later. Do you know what the most compelling evidence is that Maori ceded sovereignty? You got to get this. Can anybody tell me what is the most compelling evidence that Maori ceded sovereignty? Unless you were here last night, I've got a little cup for whoever gets this. This is called the Stop Co-Governance Tour Cup. I'll tell you what it is. This is deep. It's the very existence of the treaty. What did Normanby say? You don't get sovereignty, you pull out. How come Britain carried on? What does that tell you? Come on. Come on. You don't need to understand all these little words and what they meant and how Kāwhuru twisted everything. The British carried on. It's compelling. Look. Remember the brief Lord Normanby gave to Hobson? The impossibility of Her Majesty extending to them, Maori, any effectual protection unless the Queen be acknowledged as the sovereign of their country. Is that good? Yep. Give me a clap for that. I'm telling you, this did not come out of a book. Lord Normanby's instructions were clear. He was definite. It was essentially get sovereignty for the Queen and Britain completely, or the deal is, and forever, or the deal is off. We're pulling out of New Zealand. No sovereignty, no treaty. No sovereignty, no deal. If you don't get sovereignty, don't bother going any further. Leave Maori to self-annihilate. Leave them to the French. We are out. The fact that the treaty exists and that Britain did not pull out of New Zealand but carried on tells us emphatically what really happened on February the 6th, 1840. Maori ceded sovereignty. They did. Maori ceded sovereignty. These guys out here all say Maori did not cede. Look at their little signs. Maori didn't. How many saw the signs? Maori didn't cede sovereignty. What did the activists say? Maori didn't cede sovereignty. You've got to hang on to this because this is gold. I wish they were in here. Well, no, I don't actually wish that, to be honest. This is a proclamation that went all over New Zealand straight after the treaty. Look, and it says this. I'll just go back for a second. This is a proclamation. Whereas I have a command from Her Majesty Queen Victoria through her Principal Secretary of State of the Colonies to assert on the grounds of discovery the sovereign rights of Her Majesty over the southern islands of New Zealand, commonly called the Middle Island and Stewart Island, and the island common called the Northern Island, having been ceded in sovereignty to Her Majesty. This was put everywhere. Now, my question is this. This was a proclamation published all around New Zealand after the Treaty of Waitangi was signed off by the Maori chiefs. Would the British have been so deceitful, so foolish to publish the proclamation all over New Zealand for the chiefs to see in plain sight if it were not true? If the chiefs were not 100% on board with ceding sovereignty? What would the Queen have thought if one of her representatives was telling lies on the other untruths on the other side of the world? Well, you know the answer. He'd lose his head. So, Kafuru's interpretation of treaty is at variance with historical fact, what the chiefs said in the tent, what the Ko-Marama chiefs sent with Saraparana Nara, and the opinions of all scholars, reputable scholars and academics. Yet his interpretation is being used by the Waitangi Tribunal as the official correct interpretation on the basis of payouts and compensation. Look at this. I want to show you this. Here's Article 2. We're just hang in there with me. The Queen of England confirms and guarantees to the chiefs and all the tribes of New Zealand the possession of their lands, dwellings and properties. So we get through Article 1 and then they get on to, we're going to protect your stuff, land, dwellings and property. The tribes, the chiefs and the people of New Zealand. Now, the next bit of Article 2 says, but the chiefs of the Confederation of the United Tribes and the other chiefs grant to the Queen the exclusive right of purchasing such lands as the proprietors thereof may be disposed to sell it. What he's saying is this. We're not going to buy any land off Maori unless they want to sell it. That the proprietors thereof may be disposed to sell. If they want to sell, we'll buy it. Look, the proprietors are Maori. At such prices as may be agreed between them. We're not going to buy anything off Maori unless we all agree to the price. Do you get it? Do you know why they did this? These were Christian men. Do you know why they did this? Because they said settlers were ripping Maori off. We want the government to handle all land sales from now on so that you can't go up to a Maori and say, do you want a tin pot for those 5,000 acres? So the British said, we're going to protect the Maori. We'll protect you guys. We'll guard your land because we've got guns and ships and soldiers. We'll look after your stuff. Does this article teach, instruct, convey the idea that Maori would be self-determining, having their own government, or that the Queen enter into a partnership with Maori? Yes or no? No. Okay. So, co-governance in Article 2, no. Partnership, no. Impossible. Right. Now, Kafuru made a big deal of this word here, possession. It's the word tino ranga. It comes from the Maori, tino rangatiratanga. This is huge. Kafuru said the word possession, tino rangatiratanga, meant unqualified exercise of chieftainship. Oh my goodness. According to Kafuru, the chiefs only ceded to the governor the right to govern settlers while they could carry on being chiefs. That is to say, the chiefs did not cede sovereignty. Tino rangatiratanga does not mean this. It simply means ownership. Ownership is right, Kafuru is wrong. How do we know Kafuru's interpretation of tino rangatiratanga is pure spin, the work of a con man? Well, there's what it says. If you put tino rangatiratanga and just make it into English, it doesn't make sense for this reason. What applies to the chiefs and tribes also applies to the people of New Zealand. There's three groups here, chiefs and tribes and all the people of New Zealand. Now, I want to ask you this. Non-Maori people in New Zealand do not talk in terms of being chiefs over their land, their homes and their possessions. Do you talk like that? Are you the chief? Some of you look at your wife going, you two, watch it. They talk simply in terms of owning them, which is precisely the right translation of this word. So Kafuru's interpretation is not a natural fit in the context. Secondly, before the treaty, Maori life was characterised by war, cannibalism, infanticide and slavery. After the treaty, historical evidence shows these behaviours dramatically ceased. Why? They had given up their chieftainship entirely and forever at Waitangi on February the 6th, 1840. The third reason it doesn't make sense, the final English draft uses the word possession. If Hobson and Busby had meant unqualified exercise of chieftainship, they would have used those words. Deliberately, they did not use those words. Number 4, Carfrew's interpretation glaringly contradicts Lord Normanby's instruction in the preamble and Articles 1 and 3. Look at this. Bruce Moon says this: it's absurd to suggest that the first provision of the treaty having been for the cession of sovereignty, Article 1, Hobson and his advisers would have contradicted themselves a few lines later to allow sovereignty to continue to reside with the chiefs. Do you get it? It's wrong. The government's just gone along with this. Mike Butler says this. He's a historian. In the text with 11 footnotes, Carfrew redefined key words to create a treaty in which chiefs only ceded to the governor the right to govern settlers while they could carry on being chiefs, which is nonsense. This guy is the heavyweight. His name is Phil Parkinson. He's a historian and chief archivist. He said this: Carfrew's modern mistranslation of Tino Rangatiratanga as the unqualified exercise of chieftainship is not merely erroneous, but it's preposterous. Paul Moon, treaty specialist, in an astounding report issued in 2014, the Waitangi Tribunal claimed that Maori chiefs who signed the treaty agreed to share power and authority with Britain but did not cede sovereignty. Professor Moon says the tribunal's conclusion was manifestly wrong. Do you know why it's wrong? Look at this. Look what I've got. You know what this is? This is the 1840 Dictionary of Maori Words written by Henry Williams. I got this out of a second-hand store in New Zealand. I've got to put my glasses on because it says this. This is what Rangatiratanga says, means this: evidence of breeding and greatness. Evidence of breeding and greatness. That makes sense. Watch this. Why did Williams, Clendon, Busby and Hobson choose Rangatiratanga, Tino Rangatiratanga? They wanted to convey the idea that all Maori, slaves, women, everybody, could own property for the first time ever. Their land, their dwellings, and all their property. This is a Christian concept. They use those words to convey the idea. Who was the only person who owned anything before 1840 and married him? Chief. After 1840 and the treaty, all Maori could own property, land, and dwellings. Isn't that cool? Oh, I was excited. Look, here's some. I'm sorry. Just calm down. Now we have to get this right, because I just want to give you you guys are so bad. Get your sick bags out. This is like an aeroplane flight, you know. On her shoulder here, is Willie Jackson, and she's asked the question, Prime Minister, do you know what the Articles of the Treaty say? And she doesn't. Watch what happens. It's so sad. She's asked about Kawanatanga, which is sovereignty, and Tino Rangatiratanga, which is possessions. This is what happens.
Minister, Article 1 of the treaty, what does it say?
Article 1, on the spot. Excuse me.
Article 2?
Look, Tina, I know the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi and our obligations. Of course, we are as a...
So she gets off the treaty very quickly. She gets off the treaty very quickly and she gets onto principles, and I know our obligations, and she doesn't know a damn thing. So I put him, he's the parrot on her shoulder. Notice Willie Jackson, the parrot on the shoulder, has given her the answers. Notice too, she did not quote the actual articles, she only quoted words which Hugh Carfrew had fraudulently twisted. It's shameful for her at the time our Prime Minister to say in one breath the treaty is our founding document and in the other not know what it says. The parrot saved her from total embarrassment. It was all captured on camera. Here's another one. Look at what she says. Now, get this, look. Tino Rangatiratanga means setting the captives, I want you to go home with this. Tino Rangatiratanga means setting them all Maori free to own land, property and dwellings. They'd have the same status as a chief with respect to land, dwellings and property. Can you remember that? That's what it really means. She comes on and says, if we could just still be chiefs over all our land, everything would be better. She's lying. She has Carfrew's interpretation. Watch her.
From what I'm hearing, it sounds like Chris Luxon has trampled all over the articles of Te Tiriti, which I'm not surprised at all. Surprised that he thought it was the right thing to do here in Te Ao Māori on the birthday of Hiramu Ratana, but I think it sends a clear message about where his values are at. Co-governance, the actual discussion is tino rangatiratanga in the articles of the treaty. That's what the discussion is, and the actual discussion is when Māori are able to control our people and our land, it's good for everyone, whether it's looking after our rivers and our waters, looking after our community, that is good for future generations. That's the conversation that Mr Luxon has no ability to grasp, and it's a bit weird that he went and made something that dishonours Te Tiriti here at Ratana today. Te Tiriti is really clear about honouring tino rangatiratanga of Māori over our lands, treasures and people. And so that's something that Chris Luxon will never understand and will never fight for. Surprisingly, had the cheek to actually put that out loud here today at Ratana.
Okay, so he's got the cheek to do this when she's actually got the cheek to tell lies in front of TV like that. Okay, look, here we go. Marama Davidson is an example of a treaty-ignorant politician. She herself does not know what the treaty says. She knocks Chris Luxon, accusing him of being ignorant, but she herself is equally ignorant. This is the case of the blind leading the blind. This is how we've gotten into this co-governance disaster. See, Jacinda Ardern, they all just say tino rangatiratanga, kawanatanga. They just spout it off. They have no idea what it means. They don't even know the treaty. All politicians ought to have compulsory history lessons. Look, this is the blind lead. We're going right off the cliff. I'm serious, this is a really bad thing that's going on here. Our whole country is being given away on the basis of fraud. Look, tino rangatiratanga means this. With respect to... Do you want me to send you the PDF file of all these slides? Would that be helpful? Okay, well then damn well fill these in. That's what I'm telling you. If you don't fill this in, you're not going to get the PDF file. I'll give you the PDF file so you can study this at home. And all the references are given. With respect to land, dwellings and property, all Maori would have chiefly status. That is to say, before the Treaty of Waitangi, only chiefs could own anything. By using tino rangatiratanga, Hobson, Busby and Williams were wanting to convey the idea that all Maori could now own land, dwellings and property. Can you see the influence of the Queen on this? They were following instructions. You set those Maori free. No more slavery. Slave trade had just been abolished. Can you join all the dots? You get it? Look, you've got to get this. It was a Christian concept. They were setting the captives free. This interpretation fits neatly and easily with Article 3 of the treaty, where all Maori were given British citizenship. Do you get that? Because when slaves were given British citizenship, they could own land, dwellings and property as British citizens, yeah? Carfrew's interpretation just clashes with everything. So what's the motivations of the two groups? What was Kafuru's motivation? Here we go. He was motivated by greed, lust, and power. What are these motivations of these boys? My boys. My mates. What was their motivation? Look. Determined to bring liberty and equality to all Maori. We're nearly finished. I'm nearly finished with the treaty. There's one more word I've got to discuss. It's the word property. The possession of their lands, dwellings, and all their property. There is one other word which is of interest here. It's the word property, which is the Maori word taonga. Bruce Moon says this word has an interesting history. In 1820, while assisting Kendall and Lee of Cambridge in compiling the first Maori dictionary, Hongi Hika had defined it as, this word, property, had defined this word as the procurement by the spear, property procured by the spear, teo. In an appeal for protection by 13 Ngāpuhi chiefs to King William in 1831, they said, "We are people without possessions. We have nothing but timber, flax, pork and potatoes." That's what they said. The word used for possessions was taonga. Now, watch this. Taonga, let's be clear, the word taonga means that which can be acquired by the spear. So when a tribe embarked on a raid to kill, enslave and eat another tribe, taonga was anything that could be seen with the eye in the immediate vicinity. Animals, women, children, walkers, implements, tools. Visible booty. Nothing more, nothing less. Kafuru fraudulently reinterpreted this word to mean treasures. He said this means not stuff acquired by the spear, but treasures. Oh. Anything Maori today in modern New Zealand that they treasure. How vague is that? Look. Thus the floodgates of fraud and corruption opened. Forests, fisheries, oceans, all the water, the airwaves. Antarctica, they're saying they were the first down there. Can you believe this? And even space travel. Do you realise that? Did you see that in the Herald? Maori want a greater stake in space travel because they were experts before 1840. That's true. That's what they're saying. It's in the Herald. How could these things be acquired by the spear? All Maori today need to do is say they treasure something and it's theirs via the treaty and the tribunal. What is this? It's fraud and corruption. Now, we're on to the last article, Article 3. In return for the cession of the sovereignty to the Queen, the people of New Zealand shall be protected by the Queen of England and the rights and privileges of British subjects will be granted to them. Now, over here, look. Excuse me. See here? You're doing really well. No. Just want to stop those falling off there. Here we have some things. This is, you can hold them. Do you want to stand up and hold this up? Okay. One more person holding something up. You just hold that there, my friend. Okay, look. The treaty in English, final draft. The treaty in Maori on dogskin, which is the one they all signed, right? Except the 39 chiefs at the Waikato Heads. They stuck, and the only difference is they stuck in the... Actually, you can put that down now. They put in the word Maori in here, last minute. Why did they put the word Maori in here? Because they wanted Maori to be absolutely clear that they were going to get protection from the British by becoming British citizens. The people who were already here from Britain were already British citizens. True? So they were saying, let's make this real clear. We want Maori to get this. What did Normanby say? Make it clear why they should acquiesce to ceding sovereignty. Did she not say that? Did he not say that? Yes or no? He did. So they put the word marry in there. Okay, you can sit down now, guys. Thank you very much. You did really well. Let's give our treaty holders a clap. Okay, well done, you. Thank you, you two. Just, pardon? No, you can sit down as well. Thank you. You are a damn good-looking guy, but I think we'll have you sit down, right? I don't want all the girls going wild. Okay. In the treaty, which is the treaty in Maori, the word Maori was inserted by Henry Williams. Apart from the date, this is the only difference between the English draft and Te Tiriti, the treaty in Maori. Look, when you get my book, when you get my book here and you read the Littlewood draft, you are getting the perfect interpretation of Maori, except you won't see that word in here. It's only in the Maori version. And they put it in there just to say, you Maori, I want it to be clear for you. You are the guys who are going to get British citizenship and protection. Isn't that cool? Look at this. Sorry. Does this article teach, instruct, convey the idea that Maori would be self-determining, having their own government? Yes or no? No. Okay. So, here we go. Co-governance in Article 3, no. Partnership, no. Impossible. Winston Peters said this, does the treaty mean partnership? It is truly staggering that the claim of partnership for Maori is being made based on the Treaty of Waitangi when Queen Victoria was not in partnership with anyone in the UK or the British Empire the day before or the day after the 1840. Judge Anthony Willey, retired court judge, university lecturer, he says this, Maori and the Crown are not partners in any sense of the word. It is constitutionally impossible for the Crown to enter into a partnership with its subjects. Then we have David Longy. Did the Queen Victoria for a moment think of forming a partnership with a number of signatures, a number of thumbprints and 500 people? Queen Victoria was not that sort of person. We can have democratic form of government or we can have indigenous sovereignty. They can't coexist and we can't have them both. You see what's happening here? We're heading for a massive clash. I don't want a clash. I want peace. But you know what? I can't see this ending beautifully. This can't go on. We're just going like this. We're heading for a big, huge showdown in this country. Now, I want to take you right back to this because we're just closing. Here's the $55 million fund. Now that I've taken you through the treaty, I want you to now see why this is so corrupt. You have to say all the media outlets in New Zealand are contractually engaged in an agreement with the government to say that Maori in partnership with the Crown through Te Tiriti, Maori never ceded sovereignty to Britain or any other state. How do you feel about the government paying media outlets to lie to you? Honestly, how do you feel about that? It's really bad. About being deceived. Remember that girl who was on the beginning on the TV3 news item? Oh, they were misinformed. Those people in Julian's seminar were misinformed. I got all the facts. This book has been out for 12 weeks. The media after me, nobody's touched this. You know why? It's just facts. They can't. If they start drawing attention to this, all this is going to come out. They're leaving this alone. This is too hot. If this got into the public realm for debate, it would all come out, this stuff. So they're saying, shit, leave the book alone. We hope he goes away. Yep. Yes, it is. Yep. You go onto Sean Plunkett's website and put in Public Interest Journalism Fund. He's got a copy of it on there. And he's highlighted all the things I'm talking about. It's called The Platform. It's on my website as well. Go to my website because I only charge $12 plus GST for you to watch it. No, it's okay. He charges $13 to watch it because he's wanting to make some money. But that's fine. I'm okay about that. He works very hard. So, it's free on my one. How do you feel about being brainwashed with false information? About being groomed for takeover. That's what this is all about. You know what? I won't speak any Maori. You know why? I had a guy in Levin who came up to me like this. He got inside the meeting and he got me by the arms and he took his cap off and he was going to give me a hongi. And I pushed him back and I said, don't, stop there. I don't do Maori stuff. I won't speak a word of Maori because underpinning it is an ideological grooming takeover. I'm not going to let them mess with my mind. You do not read it. You do not speak it. Hang on. Just as we close, I want to talk about the benefits of colonisation. Roads, because a lot is made about this, colonisation was really bad, and in that framework I just gave you, the $55 million one, it says you've got to speak about how terrible colonisation was. Well, I want to talk about that. Roads, medicines, hospitals, police, schools, cars, trucks, anything motorised, electricity, supermarkets or food outlets, clothes, cell phones, TVs, computers, aeroplanes, water that comes from a tap, dentists, modern toilets, appliances, government financial support for the unemployed, disabled and the elderly. Everything I've mentioned here and more is a result of colonisation. Now, hey, wait a minute. I'm not onto that. Who said that? Give me the cup back. Maori arrived here as settlers. I bet you were the naughty one at school. Maori arrived here as settlers in 1250 AD, about then. When the colonists arrived here in numbers around 1800, Maori had not even not invented the wheel. No, it shouldn't be up the top. Be quiet. Is this your wife? They hadn't even... Okay, shush. They hadn't even invented the wheel or shoes. Now, what am I on about? Look, watch this carefully. I wanted to know what was the rest of the world up to while Maori was here between 1200 and 1800. They did nothing. What was the rest of the world doing? That was a good question. So I found out. In 1182, the magnetic compass was invented by the Chinese. 1125, the printing press by the Chinese. 1200, gunpowder in England. 1202, the abacus in Italy. 1219, windmills in Holland. 1250, the first gun. 1268, eyeglasses. The Italians got that. 1280, clocks. 1295, glassmaking, Italy. 1300, functional buttons on clothing. That's the Germans did that. 1328, first sawmill for ship making. The British discovered that. 1600, Scotsman John Napier invents a way to calculate logarithms. 1622, the first slide rule. Britain got that. 1637, René Descartes invented the analytical geometry. 1642, Pascal designed a mechanical calculator. Now, why am I going on about this? Look at this. Look. I told you I'd tell the truth. What's my point? Here are the facts. For 600 years, Maori did nothing to develop or improve New Zealand. Nothing. Hang on a minute. Shush. You're so naughty. They could have, but they didn't. In fact, as the opposite is true, they drove many species to extinction and were self-annihilating. Give her a clap. She got the cup for predicting the slide. So Maori were here, look, and they drove species to extinction with self-annihilating. Then the colonials arrived, and through hard work, innovation and careful planning, they built the entire nation with all its infrastructure, laws, government, hospitals, schools, commerce, the systems, everything you see today. To be fair, Maori were part of the building of New Zealand too. They provided vital labour. But now, once this all is set up, elite Maori are manoeuvring by stealth to steal the whole lot. We do all the work. They now want it. What is this? What do we call this? This is the Great New Zealand Robbery. Now look. The British came to help Maori. Is that true, yes or no? Yes. Totally true. Hey, you know what? They wanted, yeah, but they've given the whole country away to us now. It's disconnected officially from Britain, but they came to help Maori, essentially. There were some benefits for them, but I tell you what, it was a massive headache trying to handle all these tribes who were still wanting to have a go at each other. And you read the history. They took on one hell of a task to try and sort this mess out. In return, Maori are robbing us. I made an analogy like this. Look, Saraparana Nata, let me acknowledge first, in the whole world, I doubt whether any native race has been so well treated by European people as the Maori. That's what he said. I made this analogy. It's like a businessman sees someone in need and reaches out to help them. The businessman gives the person in need a job. The businessman wants the person in need to be able to feed his children and look after his family. He gives them hope and a fresh start in life. Then the businessman finds out that the guy he tried to help is stealing from him and his business. Not just stealing money from him, but from his whole business. How would the businessman feel? This is exactly what is happening with co-governance. You know, you might say this is just elite Maori. These guys out here are not elite Maori, but they're being used by elite Maori. Do you get it? So, the comeback is this. The elite Maori comeback is this. You stole our land, so I want to talk about this. Dr. Muriel Newman writes this, because Maori say, oh, you stole our land. Tribes did not lose land. Tribes sold 24.13 million hectares of New Zealand's total land area of 26.8 million hectares for substantial amounts of money. Claims about land sales before 1840, about land sales between 1840 and 1865, and sales through the Native Land Court are merely claims for more money for those old sales. So I looked at this. 24.13 as a percentage of 26.8 is 90%. Maori had sold 90% of New Zealand by 1865. Conclusion? The land we are compensating Maori for today has already been paid for, so we are paying sometimes 3 or more times for the same piece of land. It's like this. They sold a piece of land in 1840 for £5, and then they go, in 1860, that wasn't enough. I should have got £20. Government says, fair enough, give you 20. And they go back in 1890, 20 quid's not enough. We want 200. Fair enough. Government says, we'll give it to you. 1940, that wasn't enough. We want 5,000 quid. Come through to 1990, we want 23 million. How many of you like to have your land paid for that you sold ages ago 5 times over, with a new valuation done every 20 or 30 years and you get paid out again? Would you like that? Come on. Historian Bruce Moon, your hero of Nelson. I wish he was here. He said loud assertions today that Maori land was stolen or dispossessed are hypocrisy, a mockery of the truth. There's the reference and the page. Let's wrap it up. Here's New Zealand's greatest researcher, John Robinson. Many of the activists and iwi leaders intend a totally dual system of government with separate Maori and non-Maori houses of parliament and a Maori veto on all legislation. A Maori veto on all legislation means private tribal companies have the final say on everything that goes on in New Zealand, on what laws and legislation are passed and accepted in both houses of parliament. Dr. Robinson goes on to say the words in the Hei Puapua report insist that power, final full authority, must go to Maori. The proposal of Mai Tiki Mai, Aotearoa, gives the iwi leadership around 3/4 of the power to rule the entire country, together with a veto on the joint sphere the other quarter. Everyone else will be disenfranchised. This is a blueprint for the complete rule of New Zealand by a determined minority. Conclusion? A coup by stealth is in progress in New Zealand. Co-governance, don't be easily fooled. Co-governance is not about co-governance. Co-governance is code for the takeover of New Zealand by tribal companies and their representatives, the end of democracy, the installation of apartheid and separatism into everyday life, the final end game being the installation of full-blown tribal rule. Let me tell you this. Tribal representatives have openly stated they want to be in control of New Zealand by 2040. I've not made any of this up. It's all in the public domain. You know what I predict is going to happen? Kiwis are going to leave New Zealand en masse. The tribes are going to be left here by themselves. It'll go back to pre-1840 warring and fighting. The whole country is going to collapse. If we don't stop co-governance, New Zealand's headed becoming the Zimbabwe of the South Pacific. Are you happy about that? This is super serious. Okay, so what do we do? We launch a Royal Commission to investigate a trail of Treaty of Waitangi fraud and corruption. I'm asking all political parties to do that. Vote for the party which is going to completely outlaw co-governance, not just tinker with it, rearranging the deck chairs. People ask me, they say, should we vote for National or Labour, National or ACT, or who should we vote for? And I've said this, they said, if we can just get Labour out and the Greens out and the Maori Party out, everything's going to be great. I said, wait a minute. If, say National and ACT and New Zealand First become the next government, what's the Greens and the Labour Party and the Maori Party going to be doing for 3, 6 or maybe 9 years? They're going to regroup. They're going to get their plans all ready to go. They're going to be thinking this is fun. And they're going to be back in 3, 6 or 9 years, and this will be all back full on. They'll have the metal to the pedal flat out. They want this. They want to be in control of New Zealand. What we have to do is we have to get rid of co-governance completely. No compromise. If you've got cancer, you get rid of the whole lot. Mr. Luxon wants to keep some. It's got to go. It's illegal. We want to stage a peaceful rally in the Auckland before the election, 223. We need a minimum of 100,000 people. We've actually changed this because we want to have one day before the election where everybody in New Zealand protests in every city to say we're not having this. Only a show of so you don't have to come to Auckland, you can do it in the city. Only a show of solidarity will force our politicians into solid legislation. We've got to say to ACT and National and New Zealand First and all the parties, you've got to get rid of co-governance. It's wrong. Don't entertain it. Is that true, yes or no? Yes. I've just proved it's wrong. What the hell are we doing keeping going with it? Even in the smallest way. They're going to have to. Well, we're going to say to them, if you don't get rid of it, you're not getting our vote. And a few 100,000 votes could swing this election. Wait. Hang on a minute. Votes speak most loudly, so only a visible demonstration of voter abhorrence to co-governance will affect real political change. Sign up on this website. I want you to donate tonight. Please, if you can, give generously. It costs a lot of money to put these events on. We are totally dependent upon donations. 2 of our team will be at the door to you have a little pottle here. I think I've left my pottle somewhere else, so we'll have to use a pot or something, which we've used before. We have FBOS as well. So, thank you for coming tonight. And please fill in this form. Give them to me, because our plan is to get a book to every single person in the whole Marlborough, Nelson, Tasman, the whole top of the South Island. We've got one guy in the Bay of Plenty, a couple, who've given a booklet to every single rural letterbox in the whole of the Bay of Plenty. We pay you 50 cents a kilometre if you do rural deliveries. Is that good? You could get rich on that. So We need somebody who's going to... is anybody good with data entry? Is anybody good with data entry, putting information into a Excel spreadsheet? Anybody here? Look at you. You're just like a classroom. All the heads go down. Because what I have to do, I don't want to have to do it. We need somebody who can put all the data we get onto this just in an Excel spreadsheet. Somebody at the back? Can you do it? Give her a hand. Thank you. Okay, that is absolutely fantastic, all right? We're on the road. All right, thank you for coming, everyone.